What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Mike Check podcast. We are in the Stanley Cup final. And I mean, man, when we started this podcast, it seemed like it would just take forever to get here. But man, is it going to be a good one? We got two excellent teams. And Sam, one of them is your teams. I mean, who would have thought that? Gosh, everything we've been through so far, like this is just insane, dude. How are you feeling right now?
I mean, it's definitely beyond words. The way this year has gone, it's been such a struggle from the start, and nothing's come easily. And for this to be the first team in my lifetime that I get to see break through the Cup final, I mean, I never would have expected them to get this far, and I'm just trying to enjoy every second of it.
Hey, dude, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, especially just with the road they've been on, the team they've been in the past 10 years, and then what they've built to. And a lot of teams, I mean, they'll go through the process of building and just be a team that gets out in the second round every year. But I
Mhm.
mean, they are in full force going forward through dominating the Eastern Conference, which is just a huge thing to do because of how good and talented the Eastern Conference is. That's amazing, and happy for you, brother. Hopefully, it works out for you guys in the end here. And then on the other side too, I mean, you got a pretty good team in the Vegas Golden Knights. Really, a team that the past two, basically since their expansion year, we're just finding a way to get back to the Cup final, and have just gone through acquiring older pieces, the right pieces to get a locker room down together, and then I've gone through some coaches as well. So I mean, the fact that we have these two, it's like, okay, we're ready to go for a nice cup final, but I think it's a pretty evenly matched one. At least it can be. Obviously, with all the series that we've watched so far, it's been a little lopsided at times. It's kind of reminded me of like the 90s Super Bowls, back in the day where they were just, whoever the champion was, it was a blowout. But
Mhm.
it seems like this is a matchup that can, I feel like it can go either way, but hopefully we get the best outcome, just for us, average fans out there. Unlike you, I know you want it quick and done and over with as soon as it comes. But what what are your thoughts about the matchup, coming up on Saturday here?
Well, it's definitely an interesting matchup. From the Panthers' perspective, I look at Vegas, and they're definitely a team that can cause a lot of problems for Florida, just on paper. Maybe if you look at the teams the Florida Panthers have had to play so far, and look at what Vegas is, they're probably at best the third best team that Florida's had to go through. I wouldn't put them above Boston. I wouldn't put them above Carolina either. Probably put them above Toronto, but besides that, you could say it that way, but you could look at it this way, that they're the only team that I think doesn't have a significant weakness. When you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, for example, their defense and their toughness and their physical play was not up to par with the rest of the teams. You look at what Carolina played last round, their offensive scoring talent was definitely lacking partly because of injuries to Sveshnikov and Pacioretty, but also partly because their system doesn't really stress high level offensive activity, something we could get into a little bit later. But I think Vegas doesn't have a team like that, right? They're pretty good at just about everything. There's no real weakness on this team. I think their defense core is definitely the strength of their team, and their defensive structure is also quite good with Bruce Cassidy now as coach. So there's definitely some challenges for the Panthers to have to overcome here in this Cup final, where there's not one obvious area of emphasis to focus on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, a lot of it can be thrown back to, the path that each of these teams had to go through in getting to the cup final. Um, Now, if I were to look at Vegas, yeah, maybe if they played certain teams from the West, it could have been a different story for them. And we saw them struggle with some other teams throughout, the entire playoffs.
Mhm.
But I also look at the Panthers, and I'm like, they went through the gauntlet. They
Absolutely.
played the best teams, from the East. There, it wasn't a cakewalk for them whatsoever, and they've come out on top. at a significant pace in each and every one of them, except for Boston. But then again, that was just such a huge accomplishment itself. Obviously, it went to 7, but they got the job done. But I look
Mhm.
at Vegas and just the way that the teams that they played moving up. I'm trying to think. So they went
Like
through
Winnipeg
Dallas,
rank one,
Winnipeg,
and
then
then Edmonton round two.
Edmonton.
And
So I would throw a team out there and be like, I don't know, maybe if they played a Seattle, if they had played a Colorado that was maybe more in playoff mode, ready to go, maybe it's a different outcome for them getting to the Cup final. The one thing I love about Vegas is they always capitalize on the opposing team's mistakes.
yeah,
If you looked at that Dallas series, I mean, especially in those last couple games, every single time Dallas had a turnover in their own zone, it led to a goal. And I'm not trying to discredit Vegas by any means, but I just feel like they had more of a ease at getting to this cup final. I feel like maybe it was the talent of the West that wasn't as high compared to Vegas's skill level. I feel like they got away with just playing some teams that just could not handle the pressure from time to time. And I look at this Dallas series. Yeah, I went to 6 games and they got blown out in that game 6. But other than that, um, it seems like the real reason that they won some of those games is just because Dallas got sloppy in their own zone. I don't really think you can go out there and say, oh, um, they won the series like outright, compared to a Florida Panthers team who really did win their series outright when they played top level teams. What are your thoughts on the matchups for each team getting to the Cup final?
you're 100% right. Your point is definitely valid here that Vegas has not been tested the way the Panthers have. That's definitely a product of the East being much stronger than the West. But I think to that point, you know, Vegas definitely took advantage of the mistakes that their opponents played. I think that's to their credit, right? I think they're the only team in the West that's shown an ability to be consistent and to force mistakes more than they make mistakes. I think that's indicative of a very good playoff team. So yeah, they're probably the strongest team out of the West, but I do think they're on the same level at least with a lot of the teams in the East. Of course, that's just maybe a product of a team hasn't been able to push their runs and trying to force them into their weaknesses yet. We know Edmonton is not that team. They're going to try and overpower you with their offense. Dallas is the same thing to an extent. They're young and they don't have the guys, especially on defense, that can create those issues besides, Mira Heiskanen. Ryan Suter at this point is not that guy anymore. So they don't really have those guys. And Winnipeg was, a fraudulent team from the start. They didn't
Yeah.
not give them a real chance. So, I think going into the series, you look at one thing that Vegas does not do great, and it's been special teams. Their power play has been somewhat lackluster, and their penalty kill, whether that's just a product of having to play Connor McDavid in round 2, their penalty kill has looked vulnerable. And so I look at that as an area that the Florida Panthers can, take advantage of. But I think there's definitely more of a clean slate for Vegas. Whether you look at that as a positive or a negative, they haven't been tested the way Florida has. You can't look at film from this playoff run and say, oh, we can do this, this, and this because it works so well against these other opponents, because Vegas doesn't have that. But you could also say Florida, being battle tested, will have way more experience in this playoffs, way more options, way more ideas of what to do against a Vegas team that isn't quite tested the way Florida has been.
I agree. Speaking of battle tested, I kind of am finding this interesting right now. For the Florida Panthers, going on the run that they've been on so far, obviously taking on Boston in 7 games, then moving on to Toronto, taking them out relatively early, and then sweeping the Carolina Hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get your opinion. Do you think them resting and having this time off waiting for Dallas and Vegas to end, do you think that this is actually more good for the team going forward and getting ready for a cup final? Do you think it's in the back of your head, you're like, "Oh, I kinda wish they just got right into it, maybe not as much rest and just keep riding that adrenaline that they have." Like, what are your thoughts when you see a team that's just gone through so much, adversity in the playoffs and then get rewarded by having so much time off compared to the other team, and then get ready to try and get back on the ice and have that same momentum and adrenaline? What are your thoughts there?
It's a great question. It's a great sort of philosophical idea of what's better, rest versus rust. And I think when I look at this specific situation, I think for the Panthers this will be beneficial. And the main reason is because Sergei Bobrovsky was put to the test in that last series. So it's very possible that the other skaters come out very slow, very rusty, coming off that long week and a half break. But I think for Sergei Bobrovsky specifically, who had to play in two overtime games, one quadruple overtime game with only 1 day rest in between. This week and a half off is going to be hugely beneficial for him. He's a guy that takes his regiment very seriously. He's very meticulous in his game to game prep. And so maybe while he prefers to have that simple routine of game in, game out, it's going to be beneficial for him on the whole to get that rest in the middle. But I think for Vegas, this is going to be good for their skaters in particular because it's a really nice balance of, you have a few extra days off. I think they have 5 days off,
Yeah.
but not so much to the point where game speed is, not where it needs to be. Like they're still mentally there, even if physically they have a few days off.
Yeah, no, the reason I mention it is just watching the NBA playoffs going on. I saw Matty Kachuk was on TNT with
Mhm.
Charles Barkley and Shaq and all of
All
those
right.
guys, and they were chatting it up. And they did come out and ask Kachuk, like, don't you just want the Dallas Vegas series to be over with? And I think Kachuk gave a great answer. He was like, you know what? As much as we want to just keep going and, get this thing done as soon as possible, yeah, we're going to benefit from the rest. It's and that being your leader in the locker room, as long as he's standing tall and he knows where he's at and his head is clear and he's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We're going to do what we can. We're enjoying the moment. I think that's just such a good thing to have, especially coming from your number one guy. And everybody's going to be looking to him in the locker room, especially for that opening game on Saturday. So I think that's just kind of interesting to bring up because I know a lot of people talk about it, just especially if it's other professional sports having a bye week. You can tell that certain teams just don't have their legs in it compared to the team that was just playing, maybe 5 days earlier or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. So I just always find that very, very curious. Let me ask you this though, too. If so, with this matchup coming up here, if you were to take who are your two individuals from each team that can solely go out and win this series, win a cup winning series for each team? I guess, I mean, I'll kind of start off here and I'll look at Florida. I think it's
Mhm.
Matty Kachuk to start because of just everything he's done. He brings the emotion to everybody. He can solely win you a series, and he could do it in 4 games if he wanted to.
Mhm.
And that coming along with the help of Sergei Bobrovsky. I mean, it just everything he's been through. Those two are just in sync and doing what they've been doing. It seems like to me they would be the favorites
Mhm.
going into this final series. Um, and then if you look at the Vegas side, I know a lot of people are going to point out and be like, "Oh, it's got to be Mark Stone, it's got to be Eichel, whoever it may be, their top dogs there." I don't really think it is though, because I mean, you look at their. This is a team I think that has just they've relied more on their scoring depth than their top tier superstars,
Mhm.
and so I look at a guy like Marchessault or maybe someone in William Carlson, maybe just not your top two guys, but I feel like those guys from Vegas, they just have, like I said, if another team makes the mistake, they are the ones who always capitalize on those mistakes. And I'll mention like Eichel's leading them in points. Is it necessarily is he getting the points at crucial points in the game, like, time in the game where he's accelerating and taking over? Not always. I see that in Marchessault and Carlson, but Same thing with Mark Stone too. I mean, even though he's a veteran and he's an awesome player, I feel like those two guys that are more their depth players are more important. What are your thoughts?
You know, I definitely. It's not surprising to me that you're not going to give Jack Eichel any credit here, and
Hey, I'm giving him credit. I mean, he's leading them in points. Let's go. But
but I think in this instance, I think you're spot on for the sole reason that when you look at the previous series Florida's played, they've done an excellent job taking out the top guys for each respective team. Look at what Austin Matthews put up in their series. He had 0 goals. Look at Sebastian Aho just last series. He wasn't able to get on the score sheet. William Nylander struggled. Mitch Marner struggled. All these guys, I think David Pastrnak was really the only one in round one that was able to get going of the stars. And so when you look at what they're going into in this matchup, they're going to try and take out Stone and Eichel. They're going to do their best to not have those guys get create an impact on this game. So it's going to be up to guys like Jonathan Marchessault, like Riley Smith, like William Karlsson, like Chandler Stevenson. Those guys are going to be the ones that need to step up and score those big goals. And it's going to be very interesting because it could be that Florida revenge series for both Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault, despite the fact that management team is no longer in place, the ones that left them exposed in the expansion draft all those years ago, which was horrible in the moments. I want to get that straight. Terrible decision even then, looks even worse now because those were the building blocks of their very good team.
I mean, come on, buddy. I mean, I got 5 to 8 Buffalo Sabres playing in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, it's not as bad as you think.
You know what? You're not wrong. Thank you, Brendan Montour, by the way.
Yeah.
And so, but to your point, yes, it could be a revenge series for Marchessault and Smith because Florida's going to key in. He's going to put the Barkov line against the Eichel line. So Stone and Eichel are going to have issues scoring against Barkov and Carter Verhaeghe and Anthony Duclair. It's going to be a challenge. So they're going to need to get their chances against Matthew Tkachuk's line or Sam Reinhart's line, most likely.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tkachuk and Reinhart and how amazing they've been for your team so far. Mm-hmm. Basically what I'm trying to get to is that's great and all, but when you get to the Stanley Cup final and you look at your team, you go and look and find how many players on your team have been to the Stanley Cup before and actually understand what it means to play in this series. Right. Obviously, Vegas has a ton of players that are familiar with being in the Stanley Cup. Haven't won, but they at least been there before.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at Florida, I'm trying to think of how many. Do they have anybody that's been to the Stanley Cup?
Eric Stahl.
Patrick
Markles is not playing currently.
Yeah.
Carter Verhaeghe was a fourth liner in Tampa for their first Stanley Cup. And I think that's it.
So you've got one very old individual, and then you've got
not even a contributor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, still though, I mean, this is where they become. I mean, to me, I always look back and I think about like a player like Justin Williams, right? Like just your guy who would always get to the cup, knows how to play in the playoffs, especially when it comes down to like a cup final. Very familiar, may not be, the best team betting wise, but when it comes down to actually playing out the series, if you have more guys that have been to more cups, have won cups, that usually factors in tremendously down the road. I think, if I'm correct, I still think Vegas has more players that have been to a cup.
Well, yeah, because the core of that team went to the cup.
Exactly. Now they haven't won. I don't know if they have any cup winners on the team though. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think.
Did Pietrangelo win with St. Louis?
Yeah. Yes, Pietrangelo did. Other than that, I think they still have a majority of just individuals chasing a cup still.
Martinez, I think, won with LA.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Of course. How could we forget him? So then I guess then if you look at it, it's pretty even split.
I mean, I don't know if Jonathan Quick's going to play, but Jonathan Quick too.
True. I'm basically going to go for people who are going to have a ton of playing time in the series. They have experienced both ways. Basically what I'm asking though is, do you think the factor of Vegas being to the cup not so long ago. Do you think that's going to factor in
Oh,
throughout the series?
it absolutely will. There's no doubt about it. They have the experience edge here. And I think for Florida, they've attacked this postseason a little bit differently than I think most people would expect. And I think it's worked out. I think they've caught a lot of teams off by surprise. I mean, teams with much more experience than them, like Boston, for example, really struggled against their sort of never say die attitude, their whimsical nature when it comes to this playoff run. They've just had a spirit that cannot be broken. I think it's not so much about grit. They've shown tons of grit and they've shown tons of effort and never giving up type of mentality. But it's not just that, it's that they're having a blast doing it. I think that is going to be the only thing that can really counter the experience that Vegas has going into this. It's not even about who's hungrier, it's just about who's going to be more determined. And I think Florida may be more determined to keep playing just because of how much fun they're having, really.
Yeah, no, I definitely see it in Florida's just as soon as they step on the ice, they bring the adrenaline. They have the little extra pep in their step because it seems like they truly are just enjoying where they're at,
Mhm.
and it's almost like they don't have much pressure on them because it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
look at us, we just got into the playoffs by 1 point. I mean, that's the one thing that's crazy to me still is if one game didn't go their way,
They wouldn't be here.
this run would not have happened. So I think they truly do take that in and be like, obviously we think we're a great team. That's the mindset that they have. But other than that, it's like we don't have the surreal pressure compared to a Vegas who's like
Absolutely.
makes the cup their first year as a organization. And
They were
now
playing for
they're
Orleans
just
that year.
exactly, exactly. So it's kind of that magical run they're going on.
Mhm.
So basically looking at it for me, I I think it seems like a more evenly distributed matchup between the two.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go look at the physicality department though. I
Flip.
still think it's pretty even there too. I mean, I would give the edge a little bit more to Florida, but I mean, just from what Vegas has been since they become a team in the NHL, I've noticed that it doesn't matter because they started off as the team of misfits and they
Mhm.
got a little extra aggressiveness when they became a team, and they've been like that for a long time. Um, I'm still going to give the physicality edge to Florida, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas is able to keep up with them throughout this series.
Absolutely, and I think for them that starts on defense. They have tons of large defensemen that are going to never give anything up easily in their own zone. I do think their forwards aren't as physical as Florida's forwards, and that's not really a knock on them. It's just that Sam Bennett and Ryan Lomberg and Matthew Kachuk are a different breed of physicality and
Yeah.
and effort. But I think defensively, they definitely do have an edge over Forsling and Montour. I mean, Alec Martinez and Shea Theodore and Alex Petrangelo, these are incredibly skilled defensemen who are incredibly difficult to nudge off the puck. So it's going to not be easy, but I think just because of what Florida has in forward, which is super rare, probably a slight edge.
Slight edge. I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
All right. That being said, where do you think the series is going? I mean, for me, I feel like I keep on saying each and every series is going to go long. It's going to go long. It's going to go long.
Mhm.
Is this going to be done in 5 games?
No, it's
No
not.
chance.
I do not think so. I think this is going to go at least 6, maybe 7.
6 or 7. I
There's no way this is a short series, too. It can't be.
but that's what everybody's been saying though. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, you know
Is
what?
I feel like both teams are just so good where even if on the road, who starts on the road? I believe it's
Florida starts on
Panthers,
the
right?
road. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if I don't know, Florida goes down 0-2.
Mhm.
I feel like it's still someone's game. I still feel like it's anybody's series if Florida steals that opening game. I feel like both teams basically have this awesome team and good chemistry where if there is a momentum game where say something ballistic happens in the third period where one team is dominating and there's just a little mistake that ends up costing them, I don't think that'll get them mentally. I feel like both teams can battle through it, and I think that's why they ultimately got to the cup final. But I do think this is going to maximize out at 6. I don't think it'll go to 7.
No.
I don't really want to say it would go within 5, but I feel like we are just going to see the dominance from the winning team early on. I feel like whoever is going to be our champion is going to win the first 2 games. And I feel like after that, maybe a little retaliation, but I think we'll have a clear idea of who the better team is throughout those first 2 games. And from there, I don't think it'll eventually end up to 7. I think we'll be done in 6.
Well, if you think one team is particularly dominant, you must have an idea of who you think that is that has the clear advantage.
I think it's Florida.
You think so?
I don't want to do this. But like I just feel like they play the way they play on the road with no pressure. It seems easy. It seems easy, at least resetting their minds after a bad period, which they haven't had a lot of.
Right.
They can be tested though by Vegas this series. I mean, it's for everything. This is all these men have been training their whole lives to get to this moment. So this is where you see them turn into different animals out there. I just feel like Florida has the swagger of not being so, preppy or on camera. They're not overdoing it by any means. Like, oh, we made it to the cup final. They just seem so calm, cool, and collective with their journey, and it's insane. I mean, they're not going out saying sly comments. They're taking care of themselves off the ice. I think they have the edge going in, and to start off in Vegas, I feel like it's most of those guys' dream to be like, oh yeah, we get to start the Stanley Cup Series out in Vegas and play spoiler.
Yeah.
That's their entire run here. So
Yeah.
I feel like they're going to strike, and they're going to strike early. And I think they might get 2 games in Vegas. I really think they have a real shot at it. I don't see Vegas going 2-0 though. I don't see Vegas going 2-0.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it'll be a split to start.
Mhm.
And then from there, you bring it down to the close to Miami area, and
Thank you for
that's a
nothing.
lot of travel. I mean, that's a lot of travel. I know everything's gonna be separated, but I feel like Vegas is just, that preppy type of like area, like very fine tuned place to go play hockey. And then they realize, oh wait, we got to go all the way over to the east, down towards Miami. And they'll be like, oh, this is cool. I'm liking this, still feeling that preppiness. Where I feel like the Florida Panthers, they're just like, nah, I mean, we're just playing hockey. We're having fun. We're enjoying the moment.
Yeah. Well, I hope they don't get distracted by Vegas, but the city. But
I
we'll
don't
see.
think they will. And like you mentioned earlier too, I feel like the special teams is just so much better through Florida.
Recently, they've been much better.
It can switch. I know it can switch immediately. And I'm knocking on wood right now. Bobrovsky has been insane
He's
too.
been.
It doesn't matter what Vegas throws at him. He has found a way to absolutely dominate each and every single series that he's been in. And I don't see him going cold relatively soon.
I want to take a moment to appreciate this because what Sergei Bobrovsky has done, I think, is pretty unparalleled in NHL history. To have a guy come in here as a $10 million goaltender, underwhelm his first 4 years. I mean, his best stints, he was an average goaltender, and to come into this playoffs and now play the best hockey of his career, better than his Vezina years, to come in and play better than those times when it's most important and most vital for this team, I think is one of the best stories we've ever seen. And if
Yeah,
we just keep
absolutely.
going for another week and a half, I mean, you're right. It's going to be tough for Vegas. We can get into some of the more hockey type decisions here, but just on the surface, I mean, it's gonna if Toronto couldn't do it, if Carolina couldn't do it, if the end at Boston they couldn't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think Vegas is gonna be able to solve them.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think who he's reminding me of, at least this run he's going on.
Jean Sebastian
Oh, you
Vegas.
know who he reminds me of is Carey Price with Montreal during the COVID year. No, literally single-handedly like took the team to the cup final, but the only difference is Florida has a full team.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it literally reminds me of the same thing.
yeah.
It, ultimately, when they got to the cup final, it was a little bit different, but at the same time, I mean, you have a Sam Reinhart, you have your Matty Tkachuk, you have your core depth guys like Duclair doing what they need to do to bring the consistent energy on the ice every single shift. I'm just really blown away by the way that those guys work, and I feel like they have more energy and celebrating the little things. If it's getting through a tough period, and coming out with a 0-0 score, I feel like they take that to heart more than most teams do.
Mhm.
So I like seeing that. From the Vegas standpoint, I'm not saying like they don't have a chance at winning.
Definitely,
Of course they have a
of
chance.
course.
It can easily run through Vegas. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and it does go to 7, and then that's a big factor because Game 7's in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
It's become a hard place to play.
yeah.
They
Pretty
do have I think they have an older, um, you know,
demographic.
yeah, I would say so, but like at least from a star player potential or more experienced, I would say. Um, and I feel like they'll play more of an old school style of hockey where I feel like Florida, they're able to do many things, but also adjust if it's not executing properly.
Mhm. So definitely 100% Vegas. They can absolutely win this series because of their experience and because of their depth offensively, which is going to create problems for Florida, and their strong defensive structure as well. But when I look at what Florida did, and this is the moment I got really converted, was against Carolina. When that forecheck was that effective against that defense core, I thought, okay, this forecheck is special. They can do this to anybody. And
Yeah.
I don't think Vegas has played a team with this good of a forecheck. Not that another forecheck this good exists, but I don't think they've even played a team with a strong forecheck. Definitely not Winnipeg. Definitely not Edmonton. I don't think Dallas. And Dallas is probably the best one of those. Still not super. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Florida's.
Um, and as much as I've given the credit to, making adjustments to Florida, I feel like Vegas is that team though too. So I think they're going to be tested. With Florida having the rest, like we talked about too, I think it's going to benefit Florida just because they'll be ready to go. They'll be fresh, ready to throw their bodies, do whatever they have to do to win those first couple games and just get that
Mhm.
mood flipped over. I think Vegas can easily make adjustments. It just depends on the style of play that's going on, and it will come down to what special teams are out there at certain moments. But if you were to take away all penalties and just play 5-on-5 hockey,
Yeah.
for the entire series, I'm going to go with the Florida Panthers. I feel like they are just this is the year. This is their team. It seems like it's been unstoppable. I'm going to take the Panthers in 6 games.
Yeah, the 5-on-5 Florida has been stellar, and I think it's going to be huge for Vegas to get zone exits, efficient zone exits, and they're good at that. They are. I just think it's going to slow down their offense in a way that it hasn't been slowed down yet. And I think with the special teams, they don't have a huge special teams advantage. That's where a lot of teams have stayed afloat against Florida. I think about Toronto and Boston particularly. Their special teams had a huge advantage, and that's what pushed those series a little bit farther. I think that this will be the Panthers in 6 as well. I think they close it out on their home ice. And I think that I just think they're one the team of destiny. I think Sergei Bobrovsky has one more series in him. And I just look at what they're going to do on the forecheck, and I think they're going to create issues that Vegas has not seen yet.
Wow. Wow. I mean, this is just
I mean,
crazy to
look at
talk about,
me
you know?
predicting my team winning a cup this year. I
Man,
cannot. Tell me this 6 months ago, man.
seriously. I mean,
Tell me
just
this.
once again, looking back at this season and just how it's gone. I mean, so many ups and downs for teams. Like I mentioned, Florida making it in by 1 point and then just being like, hey, that's all we needed. We just needed to get in and
Please
we'll
just don't
take
give
over the
our pick
rest.
to Montreal. Don't let them get Bedard. That was the
That's
whole
right. That's
mindset.
right.
Please don't let them get Bedard with that pick.
That's right.
And there's now it's pick 31. And what a year! What a year!
It's been going great. Real quick, I want to ask one more thing. Um, what does it mean for each team if they ultimately do not win the cup?
Okay, that's an excellent question. We'll start with Vegas.
Yeah.
I think with them, this probably means that they're going to have to make. No, honestly, I don't think they're going to have to make many wholesale changes. I think maybe some veterans get swapped out. They're probably going to have to deal with some more cap implications as well coming up. But I think the core of their team stays the same. I think they're proud of what Bruce Cassidy has done. So they have a system and a coach in place. But I worry for them that this team gets worse next year just because of what they have to deal with salary cap wise. I don't know if there's a way to improve.
But your definition of worse though is they still make the playoffs. They're
Oh yeah,
still going to be in contention to go make a cup run. To me, it's more. I mean, I look at like their goalie situation going forward, at least in the
that's a
next 3 years.
great points.
Like that's what I'm looking at because yeah, I looked at a ton of these teams that made the playoffs and after watching round after round after round, I'm like, I mentioned the Edmonton Oilers. Like Skinner is not a very good goalie. And the fact that they got there into the playoffs and extended throughout so many rounds, it's like, oh, okay, so you don't need that superstar goaltender to at least make the playoffs, right? That's what most teams are just trying to do that are mid-pack
Mhm.
is let's find a way to get into this tournament and make a run. But then after that, it's to win the whole thing, you usually need an elite goaltender. You need someone to stand on their feet or just have an awesome series.
Yeah.
Going forward, I don't know what the contract look. It's Hill right now. Hill and Quick,
Hill
right?
and Hill's a UFA this year, so
Hill is a UFA. Okay, that's what
they're
I wanted
gonna
to look
have
at.
to pay him, and I don't know with what money.
So that's what I'm looking at. I know they have Quick there as well.
Yeah,
And then who else went on IR for them? I'm trying to think.
Brossois out
Was it
and
Thompson or something like that?
Logan Thompson also. Logan Thompson signed, so they do have Logan
So
Thompson.
they have Thompson.
Brossois
I mean, it's so very different though because you're gonna have to rely on those guys to become good enough to get you first off back to a cup and then win you a cup, which
yeah.
is I mean, you just look at the past cup winners and how many of those goaltenders are just well-known individuals, right? At least have had long careers of being above average and have had awesome Vezina years to, just
Vesey.
cup winning years.
Yeah.
So that's where I look at. If Vegas loses, I'm starting to be like, yo, you're only going to be that team that's like there in the playoffs. Like, what are you going to have in 2 to 3 years that will get you over the hump? I mean, by that time, who knows if Mark Stone's still on your team, some of your older guys, and then even your mid-pack guys that are going to be looking for contract extensions and be like, hey, I need to get my money rather than try and chase the cup where I've been to 2 cup finals on this team and we haven't gotten the job done yet. I want to change the scenery. That's what I look at for Vegas. For Florida, I think it's completely different. I feel like if they lose, as much as it will suck, it's like this is not that big of a deal. I mean, if you look at the team from last year, yes, it was an upset, them going out pretty early. To have this comeback, though, and be like, okay, based off of the season we had previous, we thought we would be winning our division. We thought we would, have this team that would have an easier track into the playoffs in a cup
Mhm.
run. But it kind of shows you that they have this core that will be able to get you to a cup for years to come. I think it's more meaningful for Vegas in this cup final than it actually is Florida. And that's kind of why I give Florida the up, because I think they're going to be playing more relaxed hockey.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, for Vegas, they have a lot of guys coming off the books next offseason. So Theodore, Marchessault, guys like that, they're gonna have to either resign or move on from. But yes, their goalie situation is in a huge, huge flux coming up here because they don't have an answer if Aiden Hill is that guy, if Brossois, if whoever Thompson is the guy. They just don't have it figured out. And for Florida, you're right. All the core pieces are signed. They're going to have cap space to improve, particularly hopefully the defense core in this coming off season. They should even be better this next year on paper. I just don't know if you get this Sergei Bobrovsky ever again.
Yeah.
They should believe in themselves going forward. This core is intact. There's only room for improvement. They have growth coming. They have prospects that are made like Samoskevich should be ready next year. Who knows? They have room for growth and they have room to get better even from this year, which was supposed to be a down year. But yeah, Bobrovsky, it can't be discounted that this Bobrovsky may not show up ever again.
Got you. I agree with that statement, especially with goaltenders and realistically in this just day and age of hockey. I mean, it's not like the 10 years that these goalies would have back in the early 2000s, late 90s, whatever it may be. It
No
seems
Henrik
like
Lundqvist.
they have spans now. It's
Yeah.
you dominate for a year or two, and then you kind of just, not that you go real bad, but you're kind of just at the average point.
Mm-hmm.
One other question I want to ask you before we go:
Mm-hmm.
if Vegas wins, who's their Conn Smythe Trophy winner, and for Florida, who would that be?
For Vegas, I would say it'll be Jack Eichel.
They would be too.
And for Florida, I think it'll be Sergei Bobrovsky. Tough one.
See,
It's tough.
I think if Florida wins, they're going to give it to Kachuk. I think as much as Bobrovsky, I think is realistically the main deal, and for them having that ease to go play aggressive hockey, just having that great of a goaltender behind you, I think they'll give it to Kachuk because of just the emotion that this guy brings on the ice. Factored into the outstanding points that he's had throughout this entire playoff series. So I'll go with Kachuk, and then with Vegas, I don't really know how far off the other individuals are from points from Eichel. I mean, they would need, I think, I don't know, to have some really solid 3-point games. Marchessault's up there. Like I said, I mentioned him as an individual who can take over a series. I guess it really just comes down to, if it's special teams for points wise with Vegas, I think that's obviously going to go to Eichel because he is on that top circle on that power play unit, and he usually always gets a point or a primary assist more than the actual goal scored. But I look at Kachuk and just the run that he's had. He's had too many meaningful goals for him not to win it, in my opinion. Especially OT goals or last 4-second left goals for sweeps. I think that's the icing on the cake there. So I'm going to go with Kachuk for the Panthers.
I mean, if he scores any more overtime goals, I mean, it's hard to.
There we go. That's one last thing we can do. How many overtimes are we seeing in this series?
Oh man. You know what's funny? I think at this point, Florida loves playing for overtime. It's so counterintuitive, but they just seem so comfortable in that next goal wins type of scenario.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna go 2.
At least 2.
I'm gonna go 2. I'm gonna
say 3. 3 out of 6. Yeah, that seems right.
Gosh.
2 in one of those.
Dude, I don't know how much more your heart can take of these overtime ones, bro. I mean, make sure to go check up with your doctor after the series.
It's a good thing we're winning these overtime games.
That's right, buddy. That's right. Anything else you want to mention before we end the show here, buddy?
I think we haven't mentioned Alexander Barkov's name once, and
I think we need to talk about him a little bit.
Just real quick, even when he's not putting up points, he's been the best defensive center in this playoffs. he rules.
I agree. I think playing that simple, he's got that simple role, but he's doing it so well.
Hmm.
That's what I see. And I'll throw right back at you. I think Mark Stone does the same thing with Vegas. He plays a
Great
very
points.
simple role, but he does it so well.
Yep.
So well. And that's why ultimately both of these teams have made the cup final. So
That's going to be an interesting matchup. Two of the best defensive forwards in this game.
yeah.
Head to
Yeah.
head. It's going to be
Yeah.
fun.
Hey, that's what we signed up for, right? Some
Yes.
awesome Stanley Cup playoffs, finals. I think it's going to be a good one. We'll see what happens. We'll try and do a couple shows here and there throughout this series. It's going to be a crazy one, but
Yeah. I hope
hey, I can't
we
wait for
can.
Saturday to come.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We'll probably try and do a pod next week and recap the first couple games of the Cup final. We'll see what happens. We got Vegas and we've got Florida in the final. Let's see what happens. Other than that, take it easy, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys.